Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a seat. Please conclude your conversations. Move toward the tables. Okay, we're going to be starting in just a moment. So before we start, one logistical announcement. So the Media Lab staff would like the opportunity to perform a tweak on the phones that they've handed out to anyone who's participating in the demo. So if you have one of the phones that was handed out, please raise your hands and they will come around and mess with your phone. You can keep your hands up in the air or raise them periodically as you notice these gentlemen freeing up. So while they're going around adjusting your phones, welcome back. Thanks for your participation in the committee deliberation. So what I'm going to do now is, the week before last I was at the Cloud Identity Summit, and excuse me, Jeremy had been asked to host a panel on NSTIC at the beginning of the Cloud Identity Summit, and he asked me to say a couple of words about the IDESG and what our mission and mechanism of doing business is for people in the crowd who might not be familiar with us. By the way, Laura, do I get a clicker too? Oh, okay. So I have the verbal clicker. Okay, I don't rate the hardware. I'm not a trusted operator. So I put this slide deck together, and I figured that partly in the interest of transparency and partly just to have a little bit of a conversation, I would take you through what I told the Cloud Identity Summit audience. So the question posed to me more or less by Jeremy's charge for the panel is, what is it that IDESG does to promote the realization of the NSTIC vision? And I added, and how are we going to do it? So if I can have the next slide. So, of course, the first thing that we aspire to do is we aspire to enable universal acceptance of user-selectable portable credentials. And every word in the sentence matters. We would like IDESG conformant credentials to be broadly accepted across the United States, both in public sector and in private sector contexts. We would like users to have a choice of who they get their credential from and also what form factor they're going to use their credential in, right? If they would like to have a card, that's fine. If they would like to use a phone, that's fine, and so forth. So the broadest variety possible. And we would like the credentials to be portable so that you don't end up with the jailer's key ring problem, right? You're carrying 300 cards in your wallet or 2 cell phones unless one of them is a demo device that's tracking you. Could we have the next slide, please? The second thing that we want to do is we want to make registration and authentication simple and fun. So today, registration is a giant pain, partly because it's done differently everywhere, partly because you tend to enter the same information over and over and over again into various different interfaces. And of course, you all know the joy of authentication. So we're trying through usability measures to improve on this. By the way, Daza is going around very quietly like Little Mouse doing this, which means he wants you to put your hand up again if you have a phone that hasn't yet been molested by the demo staff. Could we have the next slide, please? Another thing that we want to do is we want to a certain extent, separate authentication from identification. So in many use cases, it will be important for the identities that are authenticated to be identifying in the sense that we're used to things being identifying, in the same way, for example, that your driver's license is identifying. But we also want it to be possible to fairly strongly authenticate an identity which does not identify the real world you. So if Daniel Craig wants to log on to something as James Bond 007 instead of as Daniel Craig, for some set of use cases, he ought to be able to do that. By the way, the British government did at some point actually issue a valid British passport to Daniel Craig in the name James Bond. as some sort of a publicity tie-in. Not yet clear whether that was a bad idea, but we'll see. Next slide, please. We also want to empower users to negotiate terms for the use of their identity and transaction data, right? So we want, under the mandate of privacy-enhancing solutions, to allow people to have a degree of control over what happens to their data in terms of secondary uses. Next slide. We would like also to standardize assurance levels for vetting authentication methods. This falls under our rubric of interoperability. So if I get a credential and I want it to be portable across back-end solutions, I have to be able to characterize what that credential is like, so that when I go from relying party A to relying party B, I can tell relying party B, oh, this is a, for example, LOA2 credential, or this is an IDESG level 37.5 credential. Next slide, please. We want to standardize security and privacy practices for collection and use of identity and attribute information. If we're going to administer a trust mark, we have to be able to describe to the users what it is that we're setting up as the rules for privacy and for information use. And so we have to get a vocabulary and a set of understandings about what's going to be done, so that we can characterize that as we describe to people what they're getting. Next slide. We want to standardize liability terms for IDPs, attribute providers, and relying parties. One of the barriers to adoption of authentication and attribute provision solutions is that it's not clear who is left holding the bag when something goes wrong, and the system identifies a normally staid and reliable individual like Jeremy as a less reliable and staid individual like me. So one of the things that is going to be important in the ecosystem is to understand, on what footing each of the parties is participating in these transactions. Next slide, please. And so all of these things, these are good goals, right? I think probably everybody in the room agrees that these are implicit in the NSTIC strategy, and that they're sort of part of our mission. So we are, however, next slide, going to do all of this without creating standards, technologies, or laws. We obviously can't make laws. Even Congress is having trouble doing that, and we certainly aren't going to do it. In our charter, we are explicitly not a standards-defining organization. And I think you can look around the room and see that we don't fit the demographic profile of a bunch of people who are going to be writing code tonight to implement what we describe. So all of that we're going to do by influence rather than by direct action. Next slide. And of course, we're going to do all of it as a collection of unpaid volunteers who have day jobs that have us doing something else, even if that something else is related. Next slide, please. And so, it all sounds easy enough, right? It sounds like maybe not necessarily a big deal, but next slide. We should bear in mind that what we're trying to create in the electronic world doesn't exist in the physical world. So there is, I guess, a tendency to subscribe to the naive belief that your driver's license is sort of the physical world equivalent of the one credential that we're trying to create in the electronic world, but it's actually not the case. In fact, you can't even get a speeding ticket with just your driver's license. You also need your registration and insurance for that purpose. So even in the course of the single transaction for which the supposed single physical credential was issued, you can't even use just one there. So we really are trying to build a better infrastructure in the electronic world than the infrastructure that we have in the physical world. Next slide, please. So how are we going to do this? And this is the part that I'm hoping you'll all rise to your feet and applaud, because it's sort of my speculation about how we're going to do it, and hopefully, y'all don't think that I've misrepresented us. Next slide. So the first thing that we have to do, I think, in order to get to this point where we influence this ecosystem to come into existence through other standards bodies, through legislatures, through implementers, etc., is we have to draw a picture of what it looks like, right? So basically this is our Christmas list, right? We're going to draw a picture and we're going to send it off to Santa and we're going to say we want one of these. And this is really the hard part. So today in the trust frameworks discussion and in Kathy, what was the name of the and in the functional models discussion, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to draw a picture. And there's a lot of impatience, right? I mean, so we've been, we had the holistic models pictures subcommittee, which produced a bunch of pictures. We have these discussions, and I realize that a bunch of you are probably frustrated that we're making slow progress on this. But I don't really see it as slow progress. This is a profoundly hard task, right? Drawing what the future needs to look like in a really complicated environment is a very hard task. And my experience in the SAML committee is that once you get done with that part, and a picture comes together which has the right characteristics, and we'll all know it when it happens because everybody will say, oh yeah, that's sort of it, right? Then after that, stuff starts to happen very fast. So I urge you not to get too frustrated with the drawing the picture phase. It's going to go on for a while longer, but it will be very influential when it does. By the way, what happened during the SAML conversation was that at a certain point after we had many meetings and a bunch of conversations was that Hal Lockhart had this flash of inspiration and went up to the whiteboard and drew this picture, and everybody said, oh, yeah, that's it. and then very shortly we wrapped it up. Next slide, please. So after we draw the picture, the picture is going to have a bunch of constituents on it. There's going to be pieces of the picture. And we're going to go out into the world to ISO and to W3C and to a bunch of NIST special publications and to model laws and to a whole bunch of other places. And we're going to say, oh, in our picture, this is one of these, and that over there is one of those. So we're going to identify the building blocks, right? There's going to be infinitely many building blocks out there in the real world, and we're going to pick a collection that look like what we intend, and we're going to say, look, these are pieces of a solution. Next slide. And then we're going to form liaison relationships with the people who make the building blocks. And we've already, in a certain sense, started this, right? So I'm happy to report that OIX and Kantara have issued a press release stating formally that they endorse the NSTIC principles as organizing principles for identity frameworks. I'm sorry, did I get that wrong? So someone give me the right. Oh, yeah, say yes. Safe Biopharma and Kantara. Pardon me. Sorry about that, Peter. I can't even see you. I can hear you. Yes, that's correct. Yes. So Safe Biopharma and Kantara have issued a formal declaration of support for the NSTIC principles, and the next step there is to sign formal liaison relationships with those organizations. And what this does is it gives us the opportunity as an IDESG community to say, to enter into a conversation with these organizations about exactly what it means specifically in terms of the standards that these organizations already support for them and also for others to support the NSTIC principles, so that if somebody else comes along tomorrow and says, hey, I want to support those NSTIC principle things, how do I do that? We can point at a set of agreements that we've reached with those organizations and say, this is how you do it. Next slide, please. And then fourth, we will, after we have that set of conversations and have identified the building blocks and have identified, how they apply, we will put an official stamp on solutions that combine building blocks in the right way. So things that look like the picture that we have all agreed on. And the official stamp is the trust, whatever comes out of the Trust Marks and Trust Frameworks Committee. And then finally, next slide, we will spread the word. And this is actually really important, right? We need to make sure that the broader community of relying parties and the citizens more broadly understand why it's important that there be a consistent, high-integrity, reliable identity infrastructure in the electronic world, at least for the United States, and then, more broadly as we go forward. So we're going to have to, after we have a picture that we think could be comprehended by people outside the organization who haven't been part of the conversation, start a really serious effort to do outreach and to do publicity. Next slide, please. So In other words, my sort of mental model of what I'm doing here in this organization as the chair of the plenary is on the next slide. That as the plenary chair of IDESG, I have the awesome power, next slide, to have a conversation with you guys and also with you're stepping on my lines. Have a conversation with interested parties within and without the IDESG. And now, next slide, Laura. See, I knew I needed a clicker to design a sticker, which is the sticker that we put on the solutions that we have decided look like the picture that we agree on. And the funny thing is that, I think it's enough. So I don't think that we need to, I don't think that we need to create standards. I don't think that we need to build products. I don't think that we need to create new laws. I think what we need to do is we need to point to a vision of what the future looks like. And I really do believe, for all kinds of reasons, many of which you can read in the newspaper, that if that picture represents what we all know it can represent, that there will be a demand and that people will coalesce around this idea and make it happen. So that's there's a few more slides, but they are basically denouement for an outsider audience. I think that's the task that we have in front of us. The main part of the task is to achieve consensus coherence. If we can all jointly see what the end state looks like and agree with one another about where the lines are drawn and what the pieces go into it, that go into it are, then I think we will be successful. So I'm going to urge you, to take that attitude into the committee meetings as we go through the rest of the week, and to have faith that the frustrating conversations are leading somewhere that is going to be productive and influential. That's what I had to say today. I do now want to introduce for a minute the sponsor for our happy hour. By the way, let me remind you that we have a happy hour at 6 o'clock. It is at John Harvard's Brew House. It couldn't possibly be easier to get there. You basically go out the door, walk past the red building and over to the Kendall Square T stop, which is off to the left near the Marriott Hotel. Get on the T, go 2 stops to Harvard Square, and then there'll be this trail of pre-drunken students, like ants headed across Harvard Square to John Harvard's Brew House. Or you can use Google Maps on your iPhone, unless you have AT&T, which doesn't get reception here. Mine doesn't. It could be an iPhone problem. Maybe I have an antenna issue. So I've been suffering here. So, but we have a sponsor for our happy hour. The sponsor is Chris Coram of User-Centric ID Live. And so, Chris, are you here? If you are, you have to jump up and down and shout. Oh, there you are. Okay, because I'm looking into the searchlights. Come on up. I haven't seen Chris here before, so I wanted to give him the chance to introduce himself and say a couple of words about the happy hour, and to have you all have the opportunity to give him a round of applause.
Thank you, everybody. And before I start, Randy Vanderhoof, who's the executive director of the Smart Card Alliance, we're co-producing this show in the fall, in October 15th and 16th. So Randy's going to begin, and we'll take 2 minutes and then release everybody for beers, or not beers if you're not a drinker.
Or the chairs meeting if you're a chair.
Okay.
The beverage of your choice. So I see a lot of familiar faces here, so no need to go through deep introductions. But the Smart Card Alliance has been doing an identity and security conference for 12 years. We've called it by various names, but most recently it's called the Smart Card Alliance Government Conference. And that government conference has kind of followed along the life cycle of secure identity credentialing for many years, starting with the CAC and later TWIC, and then into HSPD 12, which begat the FIPS 201, which begat the PIV, which begat the PIV-I, which begat the CIV, and we're now continuing to evolve down the path in many new ways, and FICAM has become a big part of that overall overarching infrastructure. And as we continue to evolve in this event, we felt like the market has now reached a level of maturity in terms of these other credentialing form factors and usage models that are not necessarily token-based, and therefore we wanted to expand the concept and the broadness of this event to incorporate user-centric identity. So we reached out to Chris Coram from Avesian Publications, who his publications have been doing a lot of the media coverage in this area, to be our partner to help co-produce this aspect of the event, and I'll let Chris talk a little bit about what he's doing.
Thank you. Regarding ID Magazine and Secure ID News are kind of our two flagship publications. We've been covering the identity industry for a decade plus, I guess, now, and more, as you all in this room know, things have changed from the hard token-based world into the newer worlds of digital identity and things that may or may not have those. There's certainly some areas where there's overlap. There's certainly some areas where there's not overlap. So I think we're looking to use this event as a means to start to explore that. We've got several tracks, a technology track, an NSTIC-focused track for the folks here and for the government-focused folks who will be at the event, and then a track that I'm most excited about, really, and that's the Relying Parties track, where we're trying to really get some folks who are from these other areas that will be the consumers of these third-party issued credentials to come and start to make their plans for what they will be doing in the future related to their abandonment of their siloed username and password architecture. So big thing for tonight is come on out, have a couple of beers, and we can ply you and beg you to come as speakers, bring your content, let our groups know what's happening with projects that you've been involved in, or let us know of other projects that you've heard about that would be great concepts and things for us to cover there. So kind of the opportunities for sponsorships, attendees, speakers, exhibitors, etc. But tonight, while you're at John Harvard's, I will certainly be coming up and asking if you've got some ideas of people within your organization, or if you might be a willing participant and speaker with something to share to the group. So thanks, enjoyed it, and thanks for the opportunity to present here, Bob.
Yeah, and we didn't mention the date, but the date is actually going to be in front of the next meeting of this plenary group session. So while you're in town, come an extra day early or two, come to the conference, and we're not going to step on or interfere with the activity that's going on within this great working group as well. So thanks.
Thanks very much, gentlemen, and thanks for hosting us at the happy hour. There is a chairs meeting just to wrap up and see whether we have any coordination issues going into tomorrow. That'll be at 5 o'clock. We'll try and wrap that up in time for all of the chairs to get out and lead by example at happy hour. And other than that, the rest of y'all are free to entertain yourselves in whatever way you wish prior to getting over to the happy hour this evening. Is there anything that anyone would like to bring up or ask before we adjourn the main meeting? Yes. Wait, hold on. Can we get a microphone down here? Does anybody have Daza? Just a minute. Right behind you, a microphone will be handed to you, and you can bring it over. Right here, Daza. Thank you.
I was just curious about whether observers are permitted at the chairs meeting.
Depending on, so I have no objection in view of our normal transparency procedures to having observers in the chairs meeting. I just would ask that we be sensitive to how many actual chairs, seats, there are in the meeting. So if there's enough space, I'd be happy to have people come along to watch. I would ask, though, that you listen rather than participate, just so that we can get business done smartly. Other questions? Over here, Marlena? Wow, man.
I'm just wondering where your slides are going to be posted?
My slides are, Kay, are we getting those onto the IDESG website someplace? Yes, so the slides from this plenary, generally there's a link to all of the materials, right? Do we have the page reference for that? Okay, so there'll be a link from the home page to all of the slide materials from this session.
Thank you.
Other questions or matters to be considered before we adjourn? Okay, well, in that case, ladies and gentlemen, end of day one. Thank you very much for coming, and I look forward to seeing you at the happy hour and in the morning.
Your riff is powerful.